Welcome to the Good Life Podcast, a place where we can come together to seek God's truth, talk about our faith, and encourage one another in our walk with Christ. I'm your host, Tyler King, and whether you're driving to work, doing some chores around the house, or just needing a moment of peace in your day, we're so happy to have you with us. Today, I'm joined by Mel Latorre. Mel is one who is well studied in mental health and counseling. He's helped out churches all across the world, has done extreme mission efforts over in Brazil, and just has such a great history about him in ministry. And so we're excited to hear about some of the things that he has to say today.
Hey, thanks. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So have you been traveling lately? You were talking to me about going to the Bible Museum in D.C. Was that a few months ago? Or recent?
No, just this past weekend.
Okay.
Me and Jeremy Beller, our Dean of the Bible Department, we took a group of OC Bible majors to Washington, D.C. just for 4 days. And one of our stops was the Bible Museum. And they had several cool things to show there. But one is they had a presentation from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so these really ancient manuscripts that were found in some caves and called the Dead Sea Scrolls. But yeah, so it was really cool. It was just a great opportunity. So that's the latest. Made a trip to Honduras not too long ago with some OC students as well. And we built some houses, did some service projects. So those are just the latest.
Well, and that Bible Museum is so impressive. I remember going there. And of course, you have a lot of the Billy Graham undertones to it.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of the ones who funded it, as well as a few others. But just impressive, all the different artifacts that they have. Being a big space nerd, I thought it was cool that they have the first digital Bible that went to space. It's on a little computer chip, the King James version that went up with the astronauts.
No, they had a lot of, like, even just kind of the history of the printed Bible.
Yeah.
That's really
the
been
Gutenberg
really
press and everything.
Fascinating. They also have this one section of it that they're talking about the translations of the Bible. And you kind of walk into this space and it has all these different colors, like wall to wall, and all the languages that it's been translated into, the languages it's being translated into, and then the languages that don't have a version of the Bible. And you just stand there and it's a fascinating just realization. So it was a great trip, plus just enjoy spending time with students, just creates a lot of conversations. We've talked about church and state and government and politics and Christ and faith and church. It was a great trip.
I started to say, I bet that was a lot of fun to be in D.C. with everything that's going on in the world right now.
Yes.
When I went, I think it was 2018 is the last time that I was in Washington, D.C., and I went to the Spy Museum just because.
Yeah, I didn't get to go
there.
I went to the Holocaust Museum instead. But
that was
tough. Both brutal, eye-opening, but a few students didn't want to go, and I can understand why. But I told myself that, man, it's just a reality I have to be uncomfortable with and experience. And they had pictures and first of all, just really well put together.
Yep.
But man, it was impactful.
Yeah, if you go to that, one of my friends told me, he said, if you go, obviously you don't have to, and no shame or guilt if you don't go, but he said, if you go, make sure it's at the end of your day. You don't want to start your day with that. And I followed that advice, and it was very sobering and somber, and you kind of just leave with this sense of, I don't know, just disgust that man could do that. And they do a good job paying homage and tribute to the Jews who lost their life during the Holocaust. And I mean, it was very well done, like you said, but just sobering to see humanity at probably one of its wickedest times in history.
It was a good trip all the way around, but
good.
So that's the latest.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, Bible Museum is one of my favorite places to go just walk around. I mean, I've only done it once. I say that like I've been numerous times, but it was
I recommend if people are around, or it's worth the trip. For sure.
And you can spend, how long did you guys spend?
We were there for about a day, like at the museum itself, but then all these other things we did, and one of the kids or one of the college students tracked that I think walked like 30 miles in those 4 days, So no, there's so many things to see. We went to Arlington Cemetery, the changing of the guard, and Kennedy Center, and we got a tour of the Senate. Just like I said, it was a good short trip and just an opportunity to spend time with our Bible majors and make some cool theological discussions along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's very cool. Well, welcome back then, I guess. I mean, been a busy couple months for you. I know you've got a lot on your plate, and so grateful to have the time that you can sit down and share a podcast with us. So kind of for today, our agenda is just kind of looking at this idea of mental health and Christian counseling. I know that you taught a class here at North Mac on a Wednesday night about mental health.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of those topics that's becoming more realized in its necessity in churches. I think there's probably a stigma a few years ago that was probably just like, oh, well, mental health, just get over it.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, some people can't. I remember one of my counseling classes that I took from my MDiv, our teacher was very adamant about, there are a lot of things that are changing with political correctness. And she said, we no longer say that so-and-so committed suicide.
Yeah.
We say that they died by suicide. Treating that state of depression to the point of them taking their own life as a mental sickness and a mental illness that, this was almost like a disease that has just completely taken over their mind. And that was the only cure that they saw fit. And we see that in Hollywood. We see it in personal lives of each other. I mean, it's a devastating thing to watch. Mental health decline to the point where someone loses their life or loses a battle to mental health. And then you think about, it's all over Scripture. You are well-versed in this, I'm sure, but all the ways that God mentions the mind and how powerful that is. And I think sometimes in Western Christianity, we've gotten so good about making a practice of Christianity and going through the routine that we sometimes forget about the mind.
Yeah.
And that'll be kind of what our summer series is about here at North Mac over the summer is talking about heart matters and how when Jesus walks through the Sermon on the Mount, he mentions the heart multiple times about how you've got to have your heart, your mind into these things. And if you don't, you're not doing it right. And so I just wanted to start off with the question of what made you seek pursuing a path of Christian counseling and that desire to know more about mental health and help people with that.
Yeah, I mean, back in the 90s when I was in college, which is feeling further and further back, I actually thought of going into mental health psychology. But in the 90s, there was still, in my 20-year-old self in the 90s, where there's kind of a shift in the winds in society. It was still a very secular career. There was some changes and some things that were coming along that I think mental health or psychology was kind of leading the way. And I just couldn't bring those two worlds together or didn't know how. And so I went into ministry and I took several classes that had to do with counseling and conflict resolution, and counseling for ministers was one of the classes we took. And then the master's I got right out of college was in ministry in Bible, and that had a lot of classes I took in counseling in kind of a church setting. But I just couldn't overlap those two worlds. There was, to me, too many conflicting things, or seemed to be. And then just the way it was presented to me, it was like, can you really be a Christian and be into that world? And as a 20-year-old, I didn't know how to answer that. So I don't regret the path I took. I went to missions and ministry. But early on, I've always had an interest in just the human experience. And growing up in the mission field and watching my parents, and participating to whatever extent we could as kids. But it was just fascinating to see how the human condition really contributed to a lot of the issues we had and the struggles people faced.
So growing up in Brazil, is there at all an emphasis or an attention even toward mental health?
Well, there wasn't much then, for sure. Okay. Still, I'd say a high stigma in women might have had an interest. Most men didn't think that was a thing for them, and so there was a high stigma still, and I think here as well in the 90s. But now I just kind of came back around. OC opened up a program not long ago on Masters in Marriage and Family Therapy, and so I had some discounts and some things. I thought, man, what a wonderful opportunity. So I just finished that not too long ago. And through that, I had to revisit those same issues that I did in the 90s that I just couldn't work through. But then I think maybe just from maturity, hopefully, and being much more grounded in the scriptures, I was like, wait a minute, these don't conflict at all.
Yeah.
I think the conflict is more on the cultural framework. It's the cultural wars out there that are at times using some of these things against each other. But a lot of the models and therapeutic practices, and I'm like, man, they just kind of sanitize God out of it. But this is right there in the Bible. I'll give you one example. I read an academic article on the importance of what they called common humanity. If we can understand that we have a common humanity, that could overlap or help us overcome a lot of our divisions and help with our mental health. And if I can see me and you and me, we can kind of get along. And I'm like, that's like Genesis 1, we're created in the image of God. And so there is something of me and you and me, and it's the presence of God. So things like that, I was just like, wait a minute. There does not need to be a conflict. And so I have revisited, and then having to teach some of these classes at OC and then teaching it in the church setting, I feel a lot better about it. And I think I understand how they can actually help play off each other instead of conflict with each other. And I think there is a shift already, broadly speaking, with less stigma. Still, it's there.
Yeah.
But to your original point, there was even a commercial not too long ago on TV where they were making the point. The one-liner was, "Mental health is health," as if mental health is made up, because it's in your mind somehow. It's made up, which I think that's a horrible misunderstanding of it. It'd be like telling somebody that has diabetes, hey, how about you just get over it?
Right.
I mean, it's so all that kind of came together recently, and I've just been enjoying that journey.
And so you're currently active in pursuing your hours in counseling to then get licensed, right?
So not yet.
Okay.
I do need to take this this exam, which would be kind of the next step. I've stalled a little on it because I've just been busy since I've graduated.
Yeah.
But yeah, the next step for me would be a licensure process, and that would take hours of supervision, and I would be a candidate, and at least 2 to 3 years of 2,000 plus supervised hours. Then I would be recognized by the state as a licensed therapist. But there's other venues, and that's currently what I'm doing as a non-licensed Christian counseling. And there's some positives and some restrictions either direction. I don't know if you want to get into that or not, but so that's currently where I am. I am doing counseling, but not as a licensed therapist.
Yeah, you got to get all those hours in, which is 2,000 hours. You think about that. That's
a lot.
You hear a lot of stories in 2,000 hours.
Yeah, I ended up with 400 hours of supervised therapy in the program.
Wow.
To graduate. I needed 300, but I ended up getting a little overachiever there and got 400. But so yeah, I finished. I have a master's, but it's currently a non-licensed status.
Well, that's really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of different avenues in which mental health gets brought up, especially in the church. And I'm actually very grateful that we're starting to think more about that in the modern church. I think, again, for so many years, it's been neglected.
For sure.
And even reading, one of the classes that I had to take for my master's was a Christian counseling class. And the research there, you have this void of research where 1800s, you've got a lot of people, early 1900s. And then somewhere in the middle of the 1900s, it kind of just stalls. And you've got like the Mental Institute out in California, and they're kind of trucking along. But again, there's
The
this
90s
stigma
picked up
of,
again. Yeah.
yeah. And so now I think in modern day, we're a lot more open to it. I was talking with someone, and they had lost their job, and their kids had told them, well, are you going to go see a therapist or go to counseling for this? And their response was, that wasn't even on my radar, but maybe I should.
Yeah.
And so people being a lot more open-minded to seeing someone to help them through those things. So let me ask this. We kind of talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but for me, I think one of my worries, and I think this might even echo some of the worries in the church when we think about counseling, is I've seen how counseling can be exclusive away from God, where it's a very secular method or model of counseling. And sometimes that even justifies a person to live without God. And I think that gets people into danger in the fact that, God is the counselor. He's the great counselor. He's the great comforter. And so, I don't know, just speak to the idea that those two can coexist of counseling and then Christian counseling. How do those two things, live on the same playing field?
Yeah. Well, I'm currently teaching a class at OC called Biblical Counseling and Pastoral Care, and that's it's a required class for our undergraduate Bible majors, so they have to have at least one class. And a point I've had to think through that as I'm presenting this to them, like, okay, listen, y'all, you're not going to come out of here as like junior therapists, right? You're not coming out of here licensed to be a therapist, as certain boards and different things have those requirements for licensure. But I think of it more as like a spectrum of care, which I think everybody undeniably needs. It's just a matter of where in the spectrum do you need it.
Which is interesting too, because there are a lot of people who would say, I don't need counseling. Like I don't need anyone to tell me. So
if you're a human, you need human care and connection. And so if you think of it, like I said, more as a broad spectrum, all the way maybe on one end, kind of just having some good buddies, right? You got some friends, and everybody needs it, right? Actually, if anything, I'd say we're having a pandemic of loneliness. Everybody needs relational connections. And so that could be on one end of the spectrum. If you don't have that, you're already suffering. And I would argue most people are suffering because they might be technically, quote unquote, connected with people through social media, right? That 2,000 friends you have on Facebook, but the actual relational, personal interaction, that is lacking. But put that on one end. Everybody needs that. If you go far to the other end, you might have like your inpatient care at a medical clinic, or a hospital. And so you can put that all the way on the other end. And sometimes people need that too, and there's no shame, right? You can make use of that. So if you back up and think like friends, and then you think maybe like parents, and you think of maybe like mentors or coaches, and then you think of like, your Bible teachers, and then you think of like ministers, and then you think of biblical counseling, and then you think of licensed therapy, and then you think of your primary care doctor, and you think of your psychiatrist, and you think of your specialist, and you think all that is care. All that is offering something, and we need it at different times. Now, we've pulled some of that out and made ways to have some stigma on it, but we're all on that sliding scale, right, on that spectrum. And there's something that biblical counseling, if I can just focus on those two, like your licensed therapist, which could be a Christian, or could even say a Christian perspective, or your biblical counseling. So the difference between those two is, for example, licensure. If you're a licensed therapist, there's ethics, there's a board behind it, there's schooling, there's requirements, there's laws. And if you're going to take the licensure and you're going to be presented as a licensed therapist, there are certain ethics that you must abide by. And those ethics have reasons for them. And you can argue if they're good, bad, or indifferent, but there's reasons you would have to abide by them. And they require a whole lot more training, and they require a lot of supervision, and they require a lot of specialty and models and whatnot, and the mechanics of mental health. Okay. Now, that should not be competing with, say, a biblical counselor, or even if I back up one more point, like a lot of people statistically go to their preacher first before they go to anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So what a preacher or biblical counselor to me would be a preacher with just more schooling and a little more experience. With the biblical counselor, there are no board of ethics, but we have ethics, like of following God and Jesus. Like those would be our ethics, right? There's even the law recognizes that if you share something to a spiritual, a priest or a rabbi or a preacher, they have certain accountability. You can't just go blab around. You have some protections under the state. But so a main difference is, for example, I'll give you one specific. If you are a licensed therapist, I couldn't do therapy with you, because there's this one thing in the ethics of it that is you can't have dual relationships. If I'm going to sit there with that quote unquote authority as your therapist, I can't then just afterwards we go hang out and play pickleball together.
Interesting.
Or we can't or we are in a small group together, because that would overlap this authority and power dynamics. It starts to get tricky and messy.
So it creates like an exclusive space for that mental avenue.
That's right. You can come in so if I was your therapist and I saw you in the grocery store, I would probably ignore you. But I would let you know up front, because I don't want other people knowing that you're my client unless you come talk to me. So it's really privacy is key. Okay. And that's okay. I understand that because, there's been historical reasons for it. Mm-hmm. But if I'm a biblical counselor, the fact that we know each other actually plays into the benefit of the counseling we would be doing. It's because we know each other that there's credibility, there's trust. And so we're sitting there still going to have to honor, I can't just go tell anybody and everybody about what you and I share in a biblical counseling setting. But we can lean into the relationship. We can go play pickleball. I can come visit you at your house. I can come visit you at the hospital. No therapist will be doing that because it would blur some ethical lines. So let's let therapy do what it can do best. And it can deeply unpack some past things and whatnot. But let's also have biblical counseling do what it can do best. Lean into the relationship. Be all about really biblical based, faith based. We're going to pray together. We're going to do all this stuff. So they don't need a conflict. They're just levels of care. And you might need one, you might need the other, you might need both, right? Or you might just need some good friends over here on this other end, or you might eventually need, some therapeutic, like a psychiatry or whatnot. So we just need to do what we can do best and do it instead of trying to do 10 other things that I can't be, I don't have the degree and don't have the expertise to try to be your psychiatrist and shouldn't try to. Right. And so I think part of the dynamics is we've used it for cultural wars, and we fought it on fronts that we shouldn't. We like to think that it's anti one or the other. Now, you can get certain therapists that are very secular just by their own upbringing and worldview, and they might be antagonistic towards faith, which that also is an ethical violation, because even in the ethics of today's mental health licensed worldview, it should be client-centered. And so whatever they say they believe in, you should kind of let it play off of that world. So, but people are people, and you'll have some therapists that are licensed that might make a mess of it. And you might have some biblical counselors that aren't licensed and might make a mess of it. So, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been times too where in ministry something happens or a situation pops up, and I'll try and do what I can, but then I have to realize my own limitations in understanding I don't want to make a bigger mess of this
That's
with
right.
inexperience or
a trauma, or
yeah. And so that's usually when I kind of hand it over, not because I don't want to deal with it, just because it's a delicate situation. And I think that's one of the biggest things is our minds are delicate. And, no matter how macho you might think that you are, and I mean, men, I think, are a lot more resistive to the idea of seeking therapy or seeking counseling. Unfortunately, that's just the world that we probably have always lived in.
And once again, I think as long as you understand your limitations, I don't think licensed therapists should be giving, be the spiritual guide of somebody. Now, they might have some leeway in there, but they should refer that to your preacher, your teacher, your biblical teacher. Just like if somebody came to you as a preacher and they're talking about some very complex health issues, you wouldn't tell them to do this, do that. You might be like, hey, see your doctor. And we should do that with the mental health part. There are ways to refer and times to refer to quote unquote professionals. But none of that means that you, as a biblical counselor, as a preacher, as a mentor, shouldn't still be there, support them, guide them, visit them, walk with them, have a cup of coffee with them. There's something profoundly important that a biblical counseling or in a church setting or a church member can play a role there in spite of them going to therapy or not going to therapy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Just like them going to a doctor or not going to a doctor. And so I think we just need to understand what we can do and do it well, and just let others do whatever they can do on that big sliding scale or that spectrum of care.
Yeah. So I have one more question before we kind of wrap up this, and we'll have a second part to this discussion too, because I think there's a lot to unpack here, and I think it's relevant information. I think a lot of this is what we're seeing in today's culture and society, and I mean, have been seeing. I don't think that this is a new problem. I think mental health has always existed, and thankfully, people are a lot more willing to, entertain it and listen, at least. But when you think about the church and this idea of mental health, do you think things are getting worse with people's mental health or better as, we progress as a society?
Oh, I'd say worse.
Really?
Worse. Yeah. I've read some books recently on talking about, I mentioned it briefly, how we're in people are deeply struggling with loneliness, and that's led to anxiety, that's led to depression. It's just...
Which is funny because we're the most connected people. We could talk to anyone in the world, and yet we're all lonely.
It's a very superficial, it creates an illusion of connection. There are some benefits.
Yeah.
Like I said, I can reach out and talk to some buddies in Brazil that I couldn't for years or would have cost a whole lot. So there's some positives, of course, but it has not helped us in terms of connection in the truest sense. So I would say overall we have worse mental health, or have some markers that are ticking up for a lot of reasons. I do think overall there is less a stigma, which I think is helpful. But I think the church has and always has had a role to play, and we should really be offering people a place to help with their health, their mental health. We should be supportive. We should be offering, I think our leaders should better their skills in terms of guiding people through some of these conversations. The part that we can do and should do, and God has empowered us to do, I think we need to own that. And I don't think we have very well. And so I'm happy that some of that's shifting, and there's more people that are seeing the importance of offering the biblical counseling and the support and the many things that we can do on that front. And so, yeah, we need to do that better,
which is
across the board.
Which is neat. I mean, you think about it, we are experiencing more dangerous times of mental health. It was interesting. I'd asked the college students a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about one of our topics in class, and I just said, you guys are a different generation than I am, just by barely, but still a different generation. And I said, what are some of the anxieties that you guys have in your generation? And affordability was a
Yeah.
big one.
Oh, yeah.
Will I ever have enough money to live the life that even my parents lived, where they had a house and they had a car and everything was paid off? I mean, not that houses were paid off, but they were a lot more attainable to pay off. And now we see a lot more people renting, and that's fine. It's
there's
whatever.
definitely some struggles there.
But with the finances and the stock market volatility, one of the college students reached out and said, "I'm just scared that I might get drafted to a war."
Yeah.
With impending nuclear war going on, and the big question of boots on the ground overseas, is that going to happen again? And reinstating the draft because we're low in numbers. There's anxiety in the job market with AI. A lot of things that I think a lot of people didn't have to think about.
Or maybe didn't think about it because it wasn't right there in their face with news and feed notification, push notification, all these feeds. I mean, humanity's had horrible wars for a long time. But
yeah,
no, I think you're right. I think I spend a lot of time with college students as well. And I even joke that I spend a lot of time at my other office, which is the coffee shop there at OC. This generation is having an existential crisis. Like there is fears of the unknown, the uncertainty. Like they know the world's broken, and all the people that are grabbing the megaphone to say, do this, and here's the solution, go there. Like all those they're promising a lot of things, but are not delivering. And so they feel like there is a problem, but nobody's truly offering a solution. So they're more inward focused. They're just losing themselves on social media and video games and AI, like anything to distract from the tension they feel between problem and lack of solution. They feel like the older generation doesn't understand and isn't offering true, viable solutions. They feel anxiety about the future, about their finances. They're taking longer to get married and to settle down or to find any kind of anchor. They're more anxious, more depressed. They're more lonely. It really, once again, God, the good news, Jesus, church, would address and can address all of that. Somehow, somewhere, we're not doing a good job of really clearly painting that picture and relationally offering those solutions. So, I think the time is right. I think Jesus's imagery there that the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Yeah, it's absolutely time.
Yeah, and tending to people spiritually and even tending to people mentally. I mean, those two things are inseparable. And so, I don't know. To me, it's encouraging to know that there are resources to help, that this is not an incurable thing.
No.
But that we can do a better job about equipping ourselves, reading some literature on it, listening to different things that will help equip us. Even though we may not be that licensed counselor, we can be a biblical counselor, and we can be someone to help people.
And there's a role for that. Yeah, I mean, I hope maybe some of our listeners, I would hope some church leaders would reach out. I mean, I'm sure there's more than me, you, and others, but man, the church needs to tackle this head on. How can we, as a church, reach out, be more mindful, more resource oriented? How can our leaders be more intentional? And then, man, everybody needs help. So I think people should let that stigma fade and let that isolation, then push through that isolation to ask for help.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for the conversation. Super insightful, and we will pick this up in part 2. So if you are still listening with us, then be sure and tune in next week for part 2.
My
Thanks
pleasure.
for listening. Adios.